This is Sarah, and I just want to take a moment to speak to you about this week's sponsor, Favor. Favor Inc. is a statewide family-led nonprofit 501c3 organization that is committed to empowering families as advocates and partners in improving educational and health outcomes for our children. Favor is the Connecticut state organization of the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. Favor offers a single place for families with children who have medical, mental, emotional, and behavioral health challenges to find information, assistance, and training. To find out more about Favor, please go to favor-ct.org. We are grateful for our opportunity to work with Favor as a sponsor, and now on to the rest of the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Chronicles. My name is Sarah, and today I have Jen Rafferty with me. Jen is a mom of two, a mindset and emotional intelligence practitioner. She has a PhD in educational psychology. She's an SEL coach and the founder of Empowered Educator. How are you, Jen?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm actually really excited to talk to you today. Most of our conversation is going to be about SEL, but before we get into that, can you please further introduce yourself to my audience?
Sure. So in my former life, I was a music teacher in the public schools for about 15 years and truly loved my job. I thought I was going to do that my entire career. I even wrote a book about that in December of 2019, of really just about being a music teacher and all the ins and outs about it. And I discovered during COVID that there was a different calling for me. I had a lot of very personal changes happening during that time, in addition to obviously the pandemic, where everyone was kind of going through that. My life shifted because I got a divorce from my husband at the time. I moved out the same weekend. The world shut down. And then 3 weeks later, my grandmother died. So not only was I going through the shift of, homeschooling my own kids and figuring out how to teach music online. And of course, all of the fear around this new world that we were kind of all thrust into, but also I was now separated. I was living in a new space and there was so much grief around all of it. I really had to reconstruct who I wanted to be and rediscover a new identity of what I wanted in this life. So the path that it took me on led me to Empowered Educator, which is, my company right now. Started my PhD, became really immersed in mindset work, understood how I can work with my brain, understand my brain, and know how to work with it to really do the things that I want to do in this life and not stay victim to my old stories and narratives. And a lot of those concepts are what I teach in Empowered Educator as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that backstory. And I know in Empowered Educators, you teach, SEL, social and emotional learning, to teachers rather than students. There's a lot of controversy over SEL right now. In my community and in other communities, it's become a political buzzword sometimes. Can you explain to my audience exactly what SEL is?
Sure. Well, literally, SEL, like you said, is social and emotional learning. And in my world, what that means is kind of what I alluded to before, is understanding that as a human being, our brain operates with not just intellect, but also with emotion. It is not just about information. It is about information processing, which actually happens neurologically through the emotional centers of your brain first. In other words, we are actually feeling beings that think instead of the other way around. And what happened in my perspective, and from what I've observed and researched over the last few years, is that we've, as a society, many of us have come so far away from that part of our humanity and place so much value on the tangible, on the outcomes that we can see and feel and touch. And feelings have become sort of this quote unquote soft skill that isn't quantifiable, or we can't really put any metrics to it. So it's difficult for some people to understand. Therefore, it doesn't become a value. Human beings in general don't value things that aren't really easy to understand, which is why, for example, happiness is something that's not really a value in our society. It's productivity, right? Rest isn't a value in our society. There's a whole emotional background of doing these mental gymnastics about being lazy if you're needing to rest. For me, and what I teach is that this social and emotional piece brings us back to our humanity. So we're actually able to do the information processing better because we understand how our brain works. So I think it has become politicized because it's easy to politicize buzzwords without fully understanding what it is we're talking about. It's so easy to throw a label on something and call it black or white, and not understanding that the world is actually very gray. It's colorful and messy, and it is not one thing or the other thing. So I think it's misinformation and misunderstanding without a deep curiosity for truly getting to know what this means. And then additionally, and I'll end after this thing, we've created a place where it's not safe to feel feelings. And so it's scary. I think that's another big part of it too.
No, and I agree with that. And like you said, it's so important to recognize our feelings and things like that. And we've created a space where we're not allowed to feel. I, as a healthcare worker, we were taught to not get connected to our residents or not have a connection to our residents. We're caring for the most intimate parts. You know what I mean? We're caring for people in the most intimate way as healthcare workers, as family caregivers. How do you not get a connection? How do you not have emotion? Even teachers, they're caring for students, and the teachers are caregivers. Like we forget that sometimes as a society. We think of teachers as just teachers, and they are caregivers. They're caring for our kids, sometimes our most vulnerable kids, when we are not. And they have connections to students and things like that. And they're taught that it's not okay to empathize and, that whole suck it up mentality and stuff like that. Rather than let people feel what they feel, they can kind of move on from that, whatever negative emotion it is, or whatever hard, difficult emotion it is. They can feel it and move on from it faster if they, allow themselves to accept it, process it, and move on. But I do want to talk a little bit about SEL for children versus SEL for adults, because you teach it to teachers who are caregivers. So can you talk a bit about how it's different?
Well, the how is it's less about the how and more about the why. I think, the how, sure, I can explain things in a slightly different way and, whatever. But the truth is the information is actually the same because everyone has a brain. Everyone has the same feelings on the, if you look at the feelings wheel, right? That's, and if you don't know what that is, go Google that. Everyone experiences those feelings, whether you are a child or whether you're an adult. It gets a little bit more complex, obviously, as you get older, and we feel things differently. But the why is really important because in caregiving professions, most of the focus is on the people whom we care for, right? And we want to be able to provide the best care. So we focus on that, and we place our attention on them, which is obviously important. And I need to just say that because we're doing this other thing doesn't mean that this is any less important. This is the focus. This is why we need to do these other things. And the reason why I focus on the adults and the caregivers, in other words, we have to take care of ourselves the best way that we can in order to serve those people who are in our care. We know this intellectually that we need to put on our oxygen mask first, but that doesn't actually play out in real life. What ends up happening is we wear this cape of selflessness and we continue this narrative of us being superheroes and saving everyone when in fact we are not superheroes. we're not. We are heroes. And I think that's an important piece to know about this. People in the service industry have incredibly big hearts, but they're human. They're human heroes, and humans actually need to take care of themselves. And when we fall into this story of being a superhero, what comes along with it is that, you start to think about, Superman never takes a day for himself, right? It's not like, oh, I know there's this big emergency going on, but I really need to take care of myself today, right? That doesn't happen. So when we perpetuate this superhero story, we forget that we are human and we do have needs. And as givers in a service profession or as in a caregiving situation, we can't give the same way if we are not actively filling ourselves up, taking care of ourselves. So the reason why I work with adults is because if you want to serve your kids, you need to understand your own brain. You need to understand your own self-awareness skills and build that awareness muscle. You need to understand what the strategies are for self-regulation. So when you feel yourself get activated, how to deactivate yourself so you can show up as your best self. You need to understand, social interaction and relations in a way that makes sense for not just that other person, but also for you. Because like you said before, this idea of just like, oh, well, just don't get attached to the people that you care for doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't make any sense. That is denying a big part of our humanness regarding connection. What we can do, though, is understand detached involvement and how we can be involved in what's going on and empathetic and also take care of ourselves.
That's awesome. That's really great. And that does answer a lot of questions about like, the core of SEL and emotional intelligence, keeping yourself detached from situations and how to do it and how to look at like removing yourself from a situation but still being involved and empathetic. That's like a really hard skill to have. How would you teach that to a teacher? How would you or a caregiver?
Yeah, so first of all, I do want to just point out, you're right, that it is a skill. I think sometimes we just assume that because we are in these adult bodies, we should know this stuff already. It's just not the case. I'm not great at soccer because I just never worked at it. However, if I practice soccer, I'd probably be decent. Same thing goes for these types of things. You're thrown into these positions and you're just expected to know how to do this. This is a skill like anything else. So one of the most important things I think about this idea of detached involvement is preparing yourself prior to the interactions that you're going to have with the people that you are caring for. And that means checking in with yourself, understanding what your physical manifestations are of stress, right? Because you can put yourself in an activated stress state where you are in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn just by thought alone, because that's how powerful your brain is, right? You can create a stressful feeling in your body by just thinking about something that's stressful. So, if you are driving to work thinking about all of the things already that you are going to have to face, by the time you get into the building or wherever it is that you're working, you're jacked up and the day hasn't even started yet, right? So one of the best things to do before you even get there is calming down your nervous system. First of all, understanding, where do you feel stress? Is it in your shoulders, where your shoulders like want to be your earrings all of a sudden, right? Is it the stomach pain? Is it a headache? Is it tightness in your chest? Figure out what those physical symptoms are so you can recognize them when they start to appear, because you can't see your thoughts, but you can feel your feelings, right? So that is a beautiful indicator of, okay, my nervous system is feeling a little nervous right now. We want less nervous systems. So we need to regulate our system by doing something physical. My go-to is always breathing. And, this is another thing that gets easily dismissed because we breathe all the time. And, what is this breathing thing? This doesn't seem to do. It's silly. No, it is something you do all the time, but this intentional breathing actually serves the purpose of not just getting air in your lungs so you can survive. This is about creating safety in your system when your nervous system feels unsafe. And so this deep breathing, and I always like to do the box breath, which is, inhale for 4, pause for 4, exhale for 4, pause for 4. I do that 3 times before I do anything, or if I'm feeling activated at any time, which calms down my nervous system, creates safety. And then I get a chance to choose, okay, well, what do I really want to focus my attention on right now? because your thoughts are options. They're not facts. You get to choose whatever it is you want to think to be able to feel the way that you want to feel. And that puts you back in a place of empowerment. You step back into your sense of agency over how you want to navigate your day. And that way, at least before you walk in the door, you've already feel regulated in your system. And as far as that detached involvement, as somebody is going through something that is starting to activate you, the same thing applies. When you are in the middle of having a difficult interaction, you can be there for that person without jumping into their story. And a big part of that is remaining in your body. Get into your body. So in those moments, if deep breathing isn't doing it for you and you're not able to connect to your body that way, I put my hands on my heart sometimes to just remind myself, all right, here I am. I am here. I am me. They are them. There's some sort of detachment. I'm here with that person so I can hold space for that person and support and love on that person as much as I am able. And I am also okay. Sometimes I'll put my hands on my thigh and I'll just tap my leg a little bit to get back into my body, anything that's going to get you there. And then the third part about this is the afterwards. And sometimes we need to release that emotion. So breathing isn't going to be working for you. That's fine. Go for a walk, do something physical, shake, move your body. I really like to go to a rage room. That's something that I like to do. Just get it all out and leave it on the floor.
No, I think that that's all great. And I'm a big fan of breathing and, checking in with myself. Actually, my older son has been struggling with social and emotional skills for a very long time now. And one method that we've been using on him is the HALT method. So when he comes in the house, when he gets to school, am I hungry, angry, lonely, tired? We'll even add thirsty in there. And, we might even sometimes just add other things like what is making me, if he feels lonely, is it what is making him feel lonely? What is making him feel angry? If it's angry, if we can put our finger on it. And like you said, breathing and all these things, they're skills. They're not just behaviors that we instinctively have. Instinctively, I think that when someone's escalated, we tend to escalate as well. And to learn how to de-escalate ourselves, as especially family caregivers. And an example that I can think of for family caregiver, or even for a teacher, or pretty much anybody, would be like a neurodivergent child or a patient with Alzheimer's who's agitated, pacing. We know when we approach the situation angry too, it's only going to get worse or frustrated too. Yes, mom, I know you need to put your nightgown on. It's time for bed. And she doesn't want to, and she's getting mad and she's getting combative too, being restraintful rather than finding a way to be calm, sit down, get to their level, that those kinds of teachings that they do teach you how to do a little bit in healthcare, more so with dementia care, I think, than other aspects. But, those types of things, those are kind of SEL like tricks, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. There. And the thing is, you get some training for the folks who are dealing with these extreme cases. But the thing is, everybody has a brain. Everybody has triggers. Everybody is walking around with adaptive behaviors from trauma responses that we've all developed since we were kids. Like, this is just how our wiring is. And it doesn't matter what your life experience was. We all have this. And so, the training that caregivers get, no matter what industry you're in, is very small, and it's not, it is not an appropriate amount. There's not a whole lot of support or ongoing support, right? Maybe you have a workshop that shows you a couple of tips and tricks and how to do that. But this is about sustainable change and shifting a paradigm of a way to be, right? So, when you're in that situation where you are dealing with, I'll just use your example of your mother who you want to get into her nightgown and she's becoming combative. In that moment, you are so self-aware that you realize, okay, my stomach is in knots. I'm not actually breathing right now. My chest is really tight. I actually can best serve her by taking a minute and walking outside, calming down my nervous system, and then coming back in and do this again, right? Or whatever, you know what I mean? If that is a safe scenario for you to do. Or I am now so activated, this person is now in crisis, I get to call for help because that's what I need, right? The shift becomes down to what you need, which is so backwards. You know, we're just taught as givers that we're not supposed to need anything, right? So needing something is either seen as selfish or a sign of weakness. And that's just garbage. that is complete garbage, because if we really want to show up and serve and have the best and most impactful interactions with the people that we care about, we have to take care of ourselves, period.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And I know you've kind of touched on, you know, taking care of ourselves is looked down on, showing emotions is a sign of weakness. And these were all things that I felt, and that I was even brought up as a millennial. I was brought up that you can't cry, you can't have this feeling. And really what happens is, you know, you hold it in for so long that you can't take it anymore. And we see the explosions, and we see the meltdowns, and we hear the stories of people who just never learned emotional intelligence, or SEL. And I want to ask about SEL in other forms of workplaces. I know it's starting to become trendy for some workplaces to also have training for like emotional intelligence. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's truly the reason why I work with the adults in schools, is because everyone has to go to school. So, you know, when we focus on the adults in spaces, the ripple effect is huge. The kids will get the emotional intelligence, and whatever, you know, these programs, you buy these programs, especially in schools, and I will directly answer your question in a minute, but you know, they buy these programs for schools, and they're being taught by teachers or educators who don't embody those skills themselves. So the messages aren't getting across, right? And so, yes, I think that these skills need to be learned by everybody. Anyone who has a brain needs to understand how to work their brain. You know, for so long, I just thought my brain was just a part of me, like my lungs were, and my eyes were, and my heart, and it just like did its thing. And I didn't really have to pay attention to it because, you know, your heart beats and your eyes blink and your brain just does the thing. But what I've come to realize through the research and the practices is that I can direct my brain to do whatever I need it to do, just like how I'm going to wave my hands right here, or I'm going to move my foot to kick a ball. I can actually direct my brain so I can show up and be the person who I want to be. But I can't do that unless I understand why that is not the default, why that is, you know, why that path isn't going to be the path of least resistance all of the time, that I actually need to have cognitive thought in order to do that. Because most of the time, 95 to 97% of the time, we're just operating on our subconscious, which is amazing because that means our brain is so super efficient. So we operate on our subconscious of routines and habits. I mean, just think about how many little steps it takes for you to get up and brush your teeth in the morning, right? You don't even think about it. You're probably thinking about other things when you're brushing your teeth because your brain is so efficient, but you are doing that on a subconscious habit loop, and we don't even realize it. So when we are operating on autopilot or default, we can't make any changes. It's only through this type of work that you can make the subconscious conscious and start to make decisions that serve you so you can serve others.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I think, you know, again, I think that it's so important to have emotional intelligence and understand your feelings and process them and have time and have room. And I just can't stress that enough, because I feel like there's so much stigma to having feelings still today. Our society has not overcome that. And I mean, like you said, we're emotional beings before we're thinking beings. And we've gotten to the point where we idolize, or we want to be these thinking beings, like you said in the beginning, rather than these emotional, rather than accepting that we're emotional beings and accepting that we have to feel what we feel and then we can think greater thoughts. It's a cycle, and I'm realizing that, talking to you, that this is an emotional human cycle that we all go through.
Sure. And I do have to say too, like, this is nobody's fault. I mean, we were raised in a time where our parents didn't understand the value of this because their parents didn't understand the value of that. And then their parents before them didn't understand the value. It's not until really the last, like, 20 or so years where, neuroscience has come to a place where we even realize that our brains are plastic. Up until then, it was just assumed that you are the way you are, and that's it. It's a done deal. And the science is now proving otherwise, that not only you're just not the way you are because you're the way you think you are, which also means that you can think whatever you want to think and therefore be whoever you want to be. But that's new. And I want to that's important, because it's so easy to point a finger and say, like, well, why wasn't they, why didn't they, or why wasn't I, blah, blah, blah. It's nobody's fault, but we're here now and we know better, so we can do better.
Exactly. And that's, that's all stuff I'm learning. And even my parents are learning now emotional intelligence with my kids, having two neurodivergent grandkids. One of my sons, he'll have his meltdowns and his episodes, and he'll have a little trigger, and how do we calm him down? And we have to sit and talk and go through steps, and we have processes. And my dad still is very old-fashioned at times, and this is things that I've experienced with my family. I've roughly 15, before I had my kids, I had a panic attack at work. My dad called it a drama queen fit. Recently, he's had a panic attack. He understands now that it's more than just a drama queen fit, that it's you can't actually control yourself during these moments. So now when my son gets in those moments, he has learned to talk my son down. He's actually also been my go-to person. When I'm overwhelmed and stressed, I will call my dad, and my dad will say, okay, well, what happened right before? I don't know. I was just driving. What were you thinking about? What were you listening to? What were the kids doing while you were in the truck? They were quiet. I was listening to whatever song. It was, it was actually a happy song. I don't know. I can't explain it. Okay, well, calm down, breathe. But so, these are, no matter how programmed your brain is to think in ways, I just really want to make this point clear as well. No matter how programmed we think our brain is to be set, or someone's brain is to be set in a specific way, where we don't think that we're emotional beings, we can absolutely adapt and change and realize, hey, wait a minute, everybody's feelings are valid, regardless of whether or not they're rational or not, because my panic attacks aren't rational at the time that I have them.
Feelings aren't rational. They come from a different part of your brain. That's actually, that's not the rational part of your brain. And I think that's an interesting point, because we try to rationalize our feelings, and that's the trap, because they aren't. That's we can't intellectual, that this is why we also can't talk our way out of our feelings. We have to feel them physically, because that's where we experience the feelings. It isn't intellectual. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, having someone who was so stuck in the old ways, we'll call it. I hate saying that, but I hate using the term, but it is what it is. Having someone who's so stuck in the old ways for the longest time to now be a person who says, no, let's breathe, let's go through it. Hey, you have a lot of things going on in your life, and it could be any of those things. You had a bad week. One of your kids was sick this week. You were sick this week. You got this or that or the other thing, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I'm very fortunate, though. I'm very fortunate that my dad has come around that way. I'm very fortunate that I have come around and learned to understand my emotions. And I am doing everything I can as a parent to teach these skills to my child, also, who has bigger emotions than I thought I ever expressed. But we let him have the space to have the emotions, and then we talk about calming them down, as long as he can have those emotions safely. And I think that's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the best way to do that truly is by embodying this work yourself, because what you're doing is you're not telling, you're showing. And that is way more meaningful of a message than just using your words about how we should do something. You embodying this work is going to be a game changer for your kids and for everyone around you.
Exactly. And like you were saying before, teaching this skill to teachers, having them learn it to teach while they're teaching the students. If it's like with everything, it's like with kindness. If the teachers are jerks and they're trying to tell their kids they need to be nice to each other, it's not going to happen. We're taught, I know in behavioral therapy and things like that, we're taught we have to model. And even, with my son, we have to model, we have to model, we have to model. AAC devices, whatever behavior it is that we expect, we have to model that as adults. So I think that I really love this concept of teaching SEL to adults, because this is I feel like this is just even newer. I feel like SEL in general is a fairly new concept for kids to teach students. And you really only hear it talked about being taught in the classroom. You don't hear it being taught to adults. And I think that this is just so incredibly important, the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
I just want to say that.
I appreciate that.
So you had a TED Talk recently also. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So that talk was called Generational Change Begins with Empowered Teachers, which is truly exactly this. I stated there too that teachers aren't superheroes. Actually, that clip has gone viral. Over 1 million people have seen this clip so far. So you can check that out. I'll let you know where to do that at the end of the episode. But, it's really understanding that the most generous thing you can do for the people in your life is take care of yourself, which is a radical idea. And I explained not only why that was important for the people who we're serving, but also why it's important for sustainable living for us, and some of the obstacles that we face when that happens. And truly, when we kind of get on the train of taking care of ourselves, how easy it can actually be to start making those new choices.
Thank you so much. And I'm definitely going to look up that clip, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to share that on my social media platforms.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's either at Instagram or on TikTok. It's at Jen Rafferty _.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to share that on my platforms. What is your favorite self-care technique?
Oh, my favorite self-care technique. I would say it's breathing. I mean, that's and my second closest is meditating. And I laugh when I say meditating, because if you would have asked me 5 years ago, like, Jen, how do you feel about meditation? I would have laughed in your face and have been like, that's stupid. I don't have time for that. My brain's too busy, so I am a converted meditator. But before I even got there, it's really connecting with your breath. Because not only do I practice everything that I'm telling you right now, it's not like one day I woke up and I'm like, oh, I'm empowered now and everything's great. This is a practice that happens every single day. Taking those moments to breathe, not just before transitions and after, before things and afterwards, like all of those transitional times during the day. But I actually have an alarm that I set in my phone 4 times a day. And when it goes off, I stop what I'm doing. I do 3 rounds of a box breath, and it is a beautiful moment of awareness, because it's not as much about doing this exercise when you're activated. You also have an opportunity to do this exercise throughout your day, because, like I said before, we are operating on default. So even if you have a meditation practice in the morning or a gratitude practice at night, if you are not interrupting your day, nothing is ever going to change, because your life happens during the day. So interrupting that daily life for you is going to be a game changer, because when my alarm goes off and I stop what I'm doing and I'm taking 3 rounds of that box breath, I am noticing what my body feels like in that moment, what I'm feeling that is, now manifesting somewhere in my body. What was I thinking in that moment to cause me to feel those things in my body? Is this thought something that is serving me, or is this thought something that I can really just let go of because it doesn't actually feel good and it's not actually true? It's a story that I'm making up. And then I can make a new conscious decision. It's about practicing bringing the subconscious to the conscious. So we are always feeling empowered in how we choose to live our lives instead of just like floating around reacting subconsciously to everything that's going on around us. That is not conscious living. So that to me has been the single most game-changing self-care activity that I have done that has set me up for every other thing that happened in my life since I started that. So that's always my go-to to share. And if the alarms don't work, set it to different times of your day. Like I said, before you get out of your car, when you're in the parking lot before work, sometimes during lunch, do it with a person that you are, you know, a colleague, a coworker, or someone that you're taking care of. Do it with them, right? And then before you leave the parking lot, you know, those are 4 opportune times for you to just check in with your nervous system.
Yeah. No, I think that that's great. And I actually think that the box breathing, you know, breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. I think that that is a great technique that every single family caregiver, no matter what their income is, no matter what their situation is, has access to.
Yeah, these techniques don't cost anything, right? That's the other thing. Self-care, you know, people think of self-care as like massages and bubble baths, and you know, those things are great. I love those things, but that is not sustainable self-care. That's like a nice thing, but you know, it's like, oh, I'm taking care of myself. Someone just said something to me. She's going through a tough time. Her spouse has now a terminal illness. And I said, you know, how are you taking care of yourself? She's like, well, I'm at the salon every week. I'm like, that's great that your nails look awesome. However, that's not the actual self-care I'm talking about. You know, this is the stuff that you have everything you need inside of you already, period. That anyone or anything who's telling you that you need to buy this new program or go get this new thing or spend money on this, that's also BS. You have everything you need. And what you get to do is then find people who you get to be in community with who are also doing these things and grow together. Is it helpful to have somebody on the outside? Sure. But, you know, even me, I have so many ways to access my stuff that doesn't cost anything. You know, the self-care is not something you can put a price on. And there are ways for you to get the resources you need without, you know, blowing it all in some expensive vacation and calling it self-care. That's not what this is.
You know what? Exactly. And that's something that we drive home on Caregiver Chronicles a lot, because a lot of family caregivers don't have the resources for the luxurious self-care or, you know, luxurious things like vacations, or they just can't take a vacation. They care for a person with mobility issues, and just the process of that is too much. Or they don't have the money to go to the salon, or they don't have some money to stay with the person they care for while they go. So, you know, there is a stigma to self-care being this fancy luxurious thing. And it really could be as simple as breathing, or watching a TV show that you really like, or even journaling is one of the probably, yeah, it costs you a little bit of money for a pencil and, you know, a notebook, but I think you could journal for $2 if you have internet access and find journal prompts. You know, you could just get a notebook and a pen. Music, all these, there's so many self-care resources that cost you nothing, or less than, I'd say even less than $5. You don't need to go and do, you know, spend a lot of money on self-care, or even spend a lot of time or spend a lot of resources on it. Self-care can be 5 minutes. It can be lighting an incense, or just playing your favorite song, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like whatever, any of those things can be self-care. And I think it's so important to drive that nail home, because it's something we've been teaching and talking about so much on Caregiver Chronicles, that it's so important. Self-care is super, super important. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add to this episode, or any other important points?
You know, I just think it goes back to the very core of everything is of worthiness. You know, you are worthy of taking care of yourself because you are. That's it. You exist. You are a human. You are worthy. You are worthy of self-care. You are worthy of feeling good. You are worthy of taking time to prioritize yourself. You are worthy of everything you wanted. And that's a piece of this that we don't often talk about. And we have been taught that we're not worthy. And I am, for the people in the back, because you exist, you are. And once you get on that train, everything becomes so much easier.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for your time. Can you just let my audience know where to find you?
Sure. The easiest place is empowerededucator.com, which is my website. And if you go to the resources page, those are all like the free resources that I was telling you about. You can find my podcast on there and a bunch of different PDFs about burnout and finding your calm throughout your day. And then on Facebook, Empowered Educator Faculty Room is a really great place for more content. And then, like I said earlier, Instagram and TikTok at Jen Rafferty _.
Thank you so much again. And all of Jen's information will be linked in the show notes. So if you'd like to find her, you'll be able to find her stuff there. Jen, I think you're just doing amazing work. And I think that teaching people social and emotional intelligence is so important. So I want to thank you again for coming on. And that will wrap up this week's episode of Caregiver Chronicles. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. Please like, share, and subscribe to our podcast, especially if any of this resonates with you. If you want to support the show, you could support us by going to Ko-Fi or Buy Me a Coffee. But more importantly, we'd rather you leave us a rating, review, like, or share with a friend, because that is the best, easiest, and most free way and just greatest way to share this episode. And we'll see you next week.